All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Wednesday, the 16th day of October. Election day, what, 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks, right? 2 weeks and 6 days. Amazing. And so we'll continue to talk about it. It's quite a fraught topic and excites people's passions to an extraordinary degree. The thumbnail I put up today, I think, is pretty provocative. I put up the headline from Euronews: U.S. threatens Israel with cutting some military aid. And then my title: so now it's okay to vote for Kamala, right? And then I answered, well, no. And I want to be real clear. What I'm saying here is it's not okay to vote for either of the two unitary party duopoly candidates. I get it if you vote for Harris. I actually get people who vote for Trump. I do. I understand that. I do. I don't demonize you. I think you can justify voting for Harris. I ultimately don't think it's okay, but sometimes you have to do what's not okay, right? Sometimes you have to do the wrong thing. I understand that. I'm not calling on you to do the wrong thing. I think the right thing to do is to vote for Jill Stein. And I will vote for Jill Stein, barring some massive change, barring something new that I'm not aware of at this point. And I'll let you know, right? I mean, I'm not going to hide anything. I don't believe that Kamala Harris's record demonstrates that she will be, in a qualitative way, better on all the issues combined in the aggregate. I don't believe that she'll be better than or noticeably better, significantly superior or significantly less awful than Trump. I could be wrong about that. That's the way I see it. That's why I don't think it's okay to vote for Kamala. If you want to join me, please do. 240-242-5646. Had a few little tech problems with the computer. It's really weird. Like the screens were all messed up and my right screen was on the left and the left screen was on the right. And I had to move things around. So that's why I'm a little late. Now one could say, well, why don't you make sure before, like a half hour before you're supposed to go live, rather than 30 seconds before you're supposed to go live, that your computers are working correctly, because computers are often, going weird and having buggy behavior. So maybe you should have checked, especially when you have to update them. Maybe you should have checked. So that would be one answer to my excuse, to my alibi, if you will, or as Coach would say, my halibi. But yeah, the computer was acting up a little bit, and that's why I was a little late. And I hope I'll hear you if you call. I know if you call, I will hear you. Let me put it a different way. If the phone rings, I've got a little ringer set up that shouldn't disturb you if I get a call, but that I'm supposed to hear. But right now, it isn't ringing, or at least it wasn't. Let me test it now. There, I did hear that. You may hear it too, actually, because it was a little louder than it should have been. I may have to reduce that slightly. Anyway, there you go. So the ringer does appear to be working. I'm going to reduce that gain significantly so that it's not as loud. I'm going to try it one more time. I'm surprised it was as loud as it was. It shouldn't have been. I'm surprised the gain was where it was. Let me see if I can try that one more time. Hopefully you will not hear it this time. There, that's a little lower. You might have heard it. In any event, if you want to join me, 240-242-5646. If you want to tell me why it's absolutely okay, in fact, you have to vote for Harris, I definitely want to hear from you. And if you take a different position, I know some, at least the folks on Halitics Facebook group, which I certainly urge you to join if you haven't yet. And it's, all I do is just type in Halitics into your Facebook search engine. You can also follow me on Twitter at Halitics or at Hal Ginsberg. I think they both get you to me. So that's another option for you. I don't tweet much. Probably I should tweet more. News is terrible out of the Middle East. It continues to be as bad as it can possibly be. And that's the primary reason why I don't think it's okay to vote for Harris, even though it's not the only one. People say, well, so you only really don't like her because of Israel, because of God. No, I don't like her for pretty much everything. But that's kind of the dispositive, right? That's the deciding factor. That's the deciding factor, is her support for the genocidal Jewish state. I can't I can't support that. And you can see how terrible things are in Gaza now. 65 more killed. Yesterday, the situation for children is dire. I don't even have a report on Lebanon. I'm sure it's terrible there. We're looking at potential war with Iran. The reason I asked the question is it okay? Because again, we did hear from the Harris-Biden administration that they are threatening, per Antony Blinken and Matt Miller, the State Department Spock. He's kind of a little, I hate to be mean about looks, but to me, he looks just the slightest bit Weasley, does Mr. Miller. And he sort of acts Weasley too. But he flat out said, yeah, this is the worst we've seen in terms of the humanitarian crisis caused by Israel through its genocide. And they're now, Biden saying, hey, get your act together, Israel, or in 30 days, we're going to start withholding some military supplies. Of course, 30 days, that's quite a long time, and something pretty important is happening between now and 30 days hence. That's why I can't really buy into this as anything but politics, a response to polls that aren't going well for Harris, rather than an actual meaningful change of policy. I do not see that. That's why the statement to me does not make it okay to vote for Harris. We'll get into that in great detail. I mentioned the death count, as bad as it is. And again, we heard this from our great guest yesterday, really enjoyed speaking to her, that the numbers could be 4 times, 5 times this. We had 180,000 estimated by, I believe, the Lancet credibly in July. That's the case. If that were the case, we'd be looking at well over 200,000 dead. Confirmed dead, 42,400 Gazans since October 7, and at least 65 yesterday. That's your Harris Biden. That's your Harris administration. I cannot at this point. And let me say, when I watch videos of Trump, man, I'm troubled. I don't discount those of you who bring to my attention all the terrible things that Donald Trump has said. I hear you. He's scary. But I also can't discount the terrible things that Kamala Harris has done, or at least has flat out endorsed and said she supported through her connection to as the vice president, the current president, the current administration. So, they're both terrible. I was hoping to get on today's program, did not. A gentleman I met the other night, his name is Eduardo Ribeiro. We have him right now penciled in for Friday because he has very strong views about whether Harris is somebody that we can vote for in good conscience. And I wanted him to weigh in today, did I, but he was not available. But Eduardo has told me through texting that he is available Friday at noon. So we'll have him on unless something changes, as it always may, the free-for-all. Let's get to this video. This is from Breaking Points, and I don't always like to use, I do certainly focus on other hosts than me, right, than myself, because that's the space we're in. We're in this progressive YouTube host space. And I don't always like to center them because, hey, it's my show. You want to watch somebody else, watch them. I don't need to promote them. But sometimes I think what we learn from other hosts is very important, instructive. I want to point out where I think they go wrong, or if they say something that's particularly trenchant. Here, I'm going to play some clips from Breaking Points yesterday. That's Sagar and Crystal and Sagar. Not so much because I really want to center them for their comments, but because this clip from CNN actually isn't at the CNN site. I couldn't find it on the CNN site. I first saw it on Kalinsky's program. The majority, is he the majority? No, Cedar's the Majority Report. I can't remember what Kalinsky's program is called, but I had first checked it out there, and then I went to CNN. I couldn't find the video, which is pretty interesting because this is just from, I believe, yesterday morning. pretty powerful stuff here. Couldn't get it from CNN, so I got it secondhand through Breaking Points. And the reason I use Breaking Points instead of Kalinsky is because there's a comment by Crystal after you hear this doctor, and I thought it was very, very interesting and relevant to what to my observations. So here we go. This is CNN yesterday morning.
CNN's air. Let's take a listen to that.
In all honesty, a humanitarian crisis is what you deal with when you have a hurricane, what you deal with when you have an earthquake. You have an insult and a humanitarian response. This is my career. This is what I do for a living. Every single person who does this for a living will tell you the same thing. This is different. This is not a humanitarian crisis. Kate, and I'm going to say it very clearly for your viewers to hear, this is genocide.
All right, so that's something I don't want to say, I've been saying, but, that I've been pointing out for a long time. And many of you haven't liked hearing that. But it's the truth. I mean, there's no question about it. And Dr. Haj Hassan is going to explain exactly why, based on her observations, this is genocide. It's a genocide that has been enabled by, abetted by, promoted by, really, the Harris-Biden administration. And I will not, I don't see how you can vote for that. That's, to me, this is what we're seeing now is what the world saw in 44, 45 in Nazi Germany. There is, you could say you don't quite have death camps, but Israel has turned all of Gaza into one giant death camp. And the death camps, remember, were not where the Nazis killed the most Jews. They killed the most Jews, as I understand. It was close. The number, the original estimate was somewhere 5 to 6 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis in World War II. And I believe during the Holocaust, the Shoah, I believe that number has basically remained pretty stable. It hasn't changed much. But the way the Nazis killed Jews in specific numbers has changed somewhat. The original count from Auschwitz, for example, the worst, the most murderous of the death camps, Auschwitz, was 2 to 3 million. So you'd be looking at close to 50% of the total count in that one death camp alone. And now it's, as I understand it, reduced to below 2 million dead. And the counterpart to that is that the number killed by the machine gun squads in Eastern Europe, in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, but especially Russia, has gone up significantly. So much as the Israelis are shooting children in the head, the snipers are killing children in the head. We found mass graves mass graves have been uncovered in Gaza with citizens, with Gazans, with their wrists bound behind them. That is very reminiscent of, that's very similar to what the Nazis did. In some ways different, they are using starvation as a weapon, which the Nazis did to a degree, but it was more direct killing by them. Here, simply denying the necessities of life is another method that Israel is employing.
When 70% of the population that are killed are women and children, when the population is starved of food, of water, of medicine, when you have attacks, repeated attacks on all the hospitals, the clinics, the aid distribution sites, the humanitarian aid agencies that try to help, more UN workers have been killed in Gaza than in UN's history. When you have over 900 families that have been exterminated, that have been taken off of the civil registry, killed, when you have over 17,000 children that have lost one or both parents, it's really hard to hear it over and over and over again, framed in the way that it's being framed in the media, which frankly, Kate, is very misleading. It is very misleading. 365 days of this. Death tolls that are so far outdated. We have no idea how many people are killed, but I am genuinely afraid about what we're going to find out when the dust settles. History books will be written on this. And countries will have to reckon, media agencies will have to reckon with their major role in the genocide of an entire population and in the destruction of humanitarian law and rule of order.
So I would bet that's
right, I'm going to stop it there. Obviously, we'll get a little bit more from Crystal or hear from her in a moment. I don't want to say she doesn't get a comment there, because one thing she said I did find relevant. But with respect to what the doctor was saying, I mean, it's just one horror, one atrocity piled on after the other. And at the end, she said, history books will be written about this, which is, of course, completely true. I mean, this is one of the greatest crimes we've seen. I mean, in terms of the numbers, it certainly pales compared to the Nazis. But, I don't like to, put on a scale what's the worst thing that humans have done. People, try to rank the Holocaust and, this transatlantic slave industry. And those are without question right there at the top, two of the most horrible things that have been done. I no question about it. But in terms of, which is worse, I can't do that. The only way I can say that Gaza isn't on a par with what the Nazis did is the numbers aren't quite at the same level, right? I mean, we haven't seen as many Gazans killed, but it keeps getting higher. And I do what I do because I feel I have to speak out against this. This is what I feel is a moral imperative. That's why I spend so much time, so much energy on it. I pray I'm doing something. I don't know. I probably should be going to Israel. Probably we have some kind of a duty to do that, to try to smuggle whatever we can into Gaza to do. I don't do that. I just do what I think I can do. And hopefully it makes a little bit of a difference, because you want to believe, right, that if this is happening, if there's a crime of this nature, of this monstrosity, this great that is being done by your country, right? It's our nation, right? It's our country that is behind what Israel is doing. I'm not saying we are urging Israel to do it or that we pushed Israel to do it the way we pushed Ukraine to destroy itself in a war and to immolate itself against Russia. That's not quite what's happening here. But we are not stopping Israel, and we are helping Israel. And we have a moral obligation as citizens, I believe, to say no to that. And voting for Harris is not doing that. You are not saying no. Now, if you want to say to me, well, Trump will be worse, I can't say you're wrong. I mean, it's possible, though. I don't, again, how much worse could you be? That's something we'll talk about with Eduardo. I can't be party to what's happening. All right, this is what's, I can't be party by saying you should vote for Harris. Here is a little bit more. I thought this was very instructive what Crystal Ball had to say. And I do want to hear from you. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646.
To their face.
There's been some really grim stuff that's been coming out from a lot of these doctors and the people. I mean, we've interviewed some of them here on the show in the past, but man, some of these reports that are coming out are totally crazy, and they're really not getting. They're not getting a lot of attention.
Let me say too, I don't like to do the whole YouTube censoring us because our videos didn't get large views, but the times we've interviewed people who were on the ground in Gaza, our videos have gotten some of their lowest views.
Yeah,
and
I was surprised by that.
I think it's
a lot of it is age restriction too. So, for example, we did a video yesterday about those people getting burned alive, and we knew it was going to happen.
Yeah,
but it is still kind of weird.
All right, so that is really interesting to me, right? Because I haven't gone through and looked at my numbers, but what he said, I do. That's not, let me say it differently. I do look through at my numbers all the time. I'm constantly trying to see if I'm getting any growth. And there have been some videos where I've done, get 1,600. If I was getting consistently over 1,000 views on my videos, I would be happy at this point. I mean, I would want to keep seeing more and more growth, and shows like the one we just played a video from Breaking Points, you know, they're routinely getting 50,000, 100,000 views. But I feel like, well, if I was getting, you know, hundreds and hundreds, 1,000 here, 1,000 there, 2,000 every now and again, I feel like, okay, well, I'm growing and I've got that critical mass. And I'm not at that point. I don't have that critical mass. So that's upsetting to me. But it's really interesting because what especially Sagar said, that when you have to age restrict your videos, which I do, if there's ever, you know, really, like I show you videos that are really sort of gruesome, like maybe a shrouded corpse or children, you have to note, or if you don't, I mean, I don't have to, but then YouTube will age restrict it whether I do or not. They have some algorithm. I don't think they're watching. They're not somebody, you know, in Google, in Mountain View or whatever, in some basement watching every video, but their algorithm is able to determine, you know, with it pretty darn accurately whether you've got something that they will call deserving of an age restriction. So that does tend to tamp down views. Now, whether there's something more at stake, and I've heard people say this to me, people who are on YouTube, people who do videos like I do, who say, yeah, if you talk too much about genocide or use this word, use that word, they're not going to promote your video. Maybe there's truth to that. I don't know, but it's possible. It's plausible. I wouldn't be shocked. I would just say that's why you should subscribe. That's why you should check me out every noon. I'm very regular, almost like clockwork. I know some of you say it's not clockworky enough, but it's close. And you can catch my videos and then again, comment as well, both live or whenever. The situation, again, awful. This is genocide. There's no question about it. From CNN, and there's, you know, people are saying, hey, I can't believe CNN put that doctor on there. They don't call out Israel, Dana Bash, whatever, and Tapper are clearly Zionists. They're clearly anti-peace, pro-Israel military. That's true. But that said, you know, I always try to be fair to the media. And here, CNN, they're covering it. They just presented that doctor, and Sagar and Crystal went on about how, or Crystal, but Sagar too, that they're not going to have her back. And that Kate, the anchor who did that Baldwin, it's not Baldwin, it's Baldwin, that the anchor who did that video will hear it because she let the doctor go on for too long about how Israel's a genocidal state. I don't know. Maybe they'll be upset with her. I don't know. It's news. I don't know. Maybe. I'm sure Dana Bash will have a few words for her. But this is also from CNN. UN says no food has entered northern Gaza since start of October, putting 1 million people at risk of starvation. This may be, you know, the stories like this coming out. Remember, there was, you will remember, the story whereby, and I'll get that other clip up for you in just a sec, that the Israeli military is targeting children, shooting them in the chest, shooting them in the head. That story, coupled with, again, this CNN, where the doctor, you know, flat out calls it genocide, reports that the U.S. overlooked or denied, lied to say that Israel wasn't keeping humanitarian aid out of Gaza when, in fact, we knew they were. Those stories are having an impact. They're having an effect. As we know now from the Biden announcement, that if Israel doesn't get its act together in 30 days, there'll be some aid withheld. And there you see it. If they don't get more aid. But, you know, to me, this is way too little, way, way, way too late. You know, with probably very likely hundreds of thousands dead. This isn't okay. This isn't what we should be doing. We should have withheld aid long, long ago. And now we should be withholding aid immediately, not giving them until after the election. That's what Biden's doing. Do you find that okay? I'm asking this question. I want to hear from you. 240-242-5646. Do you feel like this is enough? Those of you who support Harris especially, are you like, okay, well, how you can't object anymore to voting for Harris since the Biden-Harris team is now saying, Israel, you gotta let the aid in. There's from the New York Times, the article that came out yesterday. Humanitarian aid trucks waiting to cross the Rafah border. They're not being let in by Israel. Israel controlling both ends, right? They're controlling both the Egyptian side and the side close to Israel. And they're just saying, no, you don't get to go. I mentioned Matt Miller, the spokesperson for the State Department. And he is kind of a little truth comes out of his mouth. He said the amount of aid entering Gaza last month, September, was the lowest at any time. That's quite extraordinary, and he even gives a more precise amount, fallen by over 50%, so it's less than half of what it was at its peak. Remember, this is over a period of time, the past year, when Israel has routinely delayed the entry of any aid, stopped aid trucks. We were so upset by this, we were going to build a pier. The pier was a disaster, didn't work at all, to try to get more aid. And now it's the worst it's been. How can anyone think? How could anyone at this point say it's not genocide? So at a time, or following by just a few months, a time when the State Department flat out lied to Congress and said, oh yeah, Israel's letting in aid, when in May they were not, in April they were not. We are now seeing at this moment less than half as much aid getting to Israel, getting into Gaza, because Israel is withholding it, is preventing it from entering. Less than half is entering now, as was getting in 6 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago, when we now know Israel was also preventing aid. 1 million Gazans out of a population of under 3 million at risk of starvation. And many have starved. The Biden-Harris administration is now saying, if you don't increase the flow of humanitarian supplies, and the Times is, I love their kind of war-devastated Gaza Strip. It's not war-devastated. It's been dismantled. It's been decimated. It's been destroyed by Israel. Not by war, by Israel. The 30 days number just jumps out at me. We have an election, what is it, November 7th, 6th? I don't know. I'd have to look. I can't figure that stuff out without. Some people can know the date exactly, right? Like the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November is going to be this day. I don't know that. But it's without question, it's 2 weeks and 1 day, 2 weeks and 6 days away, 1 day less, 3 weeks less one. And I think early voting's already started, right? In many places. That 30 days is after the election. This is nothing. This is a meaningless threat. It's an empty, hollow threat by Biden. And it's not the first. One other point. If the argument is, well, Biden's not being reelected, it's Harris who's running, so don't beat up Biden and expect us to not vote for Harris. The answer to that is, Harris has said she'd do everything exactly the same way that Biden did. And I can guarantee you that this announcement was made in direct response to Harris's drop in the polls in Michigan and in other critically important states because of the direct rise of Jill Stein and because of the horrific news out of the Middle East. So why is this statement coming out now? Because they're afraid Harris will lose. That's why. This doesn't reflect any real change in U.S. policy. This does not reflect the, quote, threat, unquote, to withhold aid is no shift in American policy. Want more proof of that? Here's Joe Biden back May 8th.
I want to ask you about something happening as we sit here and speak, and that, of course, is Israel is striking Rafah. I know that you have paused, Mr. President, shipments of 2,000-pound U.S. bombs to Israel due to concern that they could be used in any offensive on Rafah. Have those bombs, those powerful 2,000-pound bombs, been used to kill civilians in Gaza?
Civilians have been killed in Gaza as a consequence of those bombs and other ways in which they go after population centers. And I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah.
All right. So let me stop it there. So he's talking there to Aaron Burnett, and I'll say this for Biden. He answered a question, right? We listened to Harris, and she bobs and she weaves, and if she had been asked that question, well, are American weapons being used to kill civilians? The first thing Joe Biden said was American weapons are being used to kill civilians. What would Kamala Harris say in response? Well, let's back up a little bit and look at what happened here. Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October 7 and killed all these people and raped women. And she always raises her voice when she uses the word rape. So to give Biden a little bit of due, he's coming clean. He's admitting what Israel is doing with American weapons. I thought that was instructive because we're hearing a lot, and I've heard this a lot from Harris supporters all the time, in fact. Oh, well, she's better than Biden. She talks about the harm that's being done to, she shows some compassion, some empathy. I heard more from Biden. I heard more straight talk from a guy who's suffering from dementia at this point, or at that point, and probably worse now. So please spare me the caring Kamala commentary. It's a load of crap. Clearly, what Biden said, unfortunately, really, and it wasn't nearly enough, right? But still wasn't really borne out. That was May 8th. The concern was that Israel was going to use ground invade Rafah, which it did. And that would lead to many more deaths, which it did. So that was trying, the Biden administration trying to get in front of that. Here's a pretty darn good article in Politico a week later by Laura Seligman trying to make sense of all this. Confused about the policy? You should be. They're even weighing now, a week after Biden said, hey, if Israel goes into Rafah, we're going to withhold offensive weapons. But the way they're about to sell Israel new fighter jets. So she's like, this doesn't make sense. And she goes through it and she explains exactly what the Harris-Biden team is doing. And she does acknowledge, Seligman does, she points out, and I have no reason to doubt. I mean, the media, I hope she's right. I hope she got all this right. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. Maybe the gray zone covered this slightly differently. I trust them even more than I trust them more. But I don't have any reason to disbelieve what Seligman reported back in May 15th of this year. So she goes on to say, one day after Biden paused the arms shipments, or one day he's pausing the shipments, another he's approving arms deals. I remember talking about this 5 months ago, but I bring this up now because it tells us, if history is any guide, if past is prologue, that you can't believe, you have no reason to take with any, real belief in its sincerity, the claim by the White House that in 30 days they might cut Israel off. It's just it's electioneering is what it is. So Biden says he's threatening to cut off more shipments if Israel invades Rafah, but only offensive weapons. And then Seligman points out what's really strange about that claim, that they're going to stop the offensive weapons, is that among the weapons that are being approved are tank ammo, tactical vehicles, and mortar rounds. Now, I don't get that, because maybe I was in the Army, but I would guess tank ammunition and mortar rounds are offensive, right? I don't see how else they could be anything else, especially if your concern is a ground invasion where tanks will be used. So it was just, a photo op, or it was just an interview. I actually want to give Biden a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because I think he was troubled. I think he just had lost control. He just wasn't, and he wasn't making the decisions at that point. And if that's the case, isn't that even more of an indictment on Kamala? So here's this woman who's 21 years younger, I guess, than Biden. Clearly, she's got all her faculties. She's there. She said she was in all the meetings. She said that to The View. I was in all the meetings. This all went through without her saying boo. Now, Seligman in the Politico makes the point that there was a legal requirement that the White House allow a certain number of arms to go through, that Israel maintain a qualitative military edge against all enemies. So she's saying, well, maybe, there's a defense there. Israel had to make, the U.S. had to make sure Israel had a better army than its enemies. Well, who are Israel's enemies exactly? Clearly, you identify Gaza, although Gaza has no army at all, right? Virtually none. And maybe Hezbollah. And Israel is so much more powerful military than either of those, there's no question. But even if it was close, let's say you want to throw Iran into that mix. Well, the State Department could just certify. The State Department certified that Israel wasn't preventing aid from getting to Gaza, when Israel was absolutely preventing aid from getting to Gaza. So the State Department can say, oh yeah, Israel's got a more powerful military than Iran, so we don't have to worry about Israel. And there's another reason that, notwithstanding that law that says Israel has to have a qualitative edge, there's a second law we know about, which is that the president is forbidden by law from selling arms or distributing arms or supplying arms to countries that deny humanitarian aid, that prevent us from providing humanitarian aid to people. And Israel was preventing us from providing is now, right in this very moment, preventing us from providing providing humanitarian aid to Gaza. So really, we're obligated under our laws to not provide Israel any military aid at all, and we still are providing it. So the law we're really breaking, that the Harris-Biden administration is breaking right now, is the law that says you can't supply military hardware to countries that deny humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid that the U.S. is furnishing, and we are. So there it is. Harris-Biden continues to break the law. That 30 days is nothing. It's a meaningless bag of shells. It's a sop. We kept supplying aid illegally to Israel. The Harris-Biden administration barely stopped at any moment, no pause. This is from Reuters reporting on Amnesty International. August 27 of this year. Israel/OPT. Took me a while to figure out what's OPT. Occupied Palestinian territories. So from Israel and the occupied territories, Israeli attacks targeting Hamas and other groups that killed scores of displaced civilians in Rafah. In other words, the Israeli attacks that killed scores of displaced civilians in Rafah should be investigated as war crimes. That's what Amnesty International reported. And how can anyone just deny that? How can anyone deny that? Those attacks launched with American weapons. Even after Biden said we're not going to supply Israel with offensive weapons to use against Rafah. So when he tells you, when the State Department tells you Israel's got 30 days, don't believe him. And guess who really doesn't believe? Bibi. He's just laughing his ass off at that crap. He knows it's a load of crap. He knows there's no truth to that. He'll deal with that problem. He'll burn that bridge when he has to, if he ever has to. Even that brief pause that we've heard so much about. I know Kamala bragged about it at one point. I was really proud of the fact that for like 1 week we didn't send them more bombs. July 12, U.S. resumed shipment of bombs to Israel. This is after they've destroyed Rafah. And they keep destroying Rafah every few months. They go into Rafah, northern Israel. That's where there was another attack in September. We'll get to that in a minute. Latest, U.S. resumed shipments of bombs to Israel. And here's what the, I don't know what that, let me see, what is that newspaper? The Foundation for Defense of Democracy. That's a super extreme, hard, rock-ribbed, pro-military, group. And so they're totally positive. They support genocide. On July 10, a U.S. official said the U.S., will resume shipments of 500-pound bombs. Now, why were they not shipped before? Was it because Biden was concerned they would be used against Rafah? Was it because Israel was refusing to allow American humanitarian aid into Gaza? No, it was an inadvertent delay. We shouldn't have even delayed it. That's the reason. It was only the 2K, the 1-ton bombs that we were delaying. I guess the theory is the 500-pound bombs don't do that much harm. They only kill, a few score people rather than, 1,000 at one shot. No, it's not okay to vote for Harris. It's not okay to vote for Harris. It's that simple. It's not okay to vote for Harris. Just a little bit more from that piece. This quote from the Biden administration really or this statement, really struck me. So the Biden official, the Harris-Biden official says, the White House is only concerned with Israel's potential use of 1-ton bombs rather than 500-pound. How can they only be concerned with the bigger bombs? I mean, those little bombs do incredible damage. You want a 500-pound bomb dropped on your house? It's incredible. This is what we're doing. This is who we are as a nation at this point. I want to be real clear. Donald Trump is terrible. Do not vote for Donald Trump. He likely would be I don't know how you could be worse. His rhetoric would be even worse. Although, frankly, Harris's rhetoric is awful too. Whenever she's confronted with the evils of Israel, oh, well, let's take a step back and look at what Israel did, as though that is relevant. It is not relevant. And the step back, if you're going to step back to 1947-48, Harris. Step back to 1967. Step back to 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon. Come on. Israeli forces killed dozens across Rafah as tanks advanced deeper. So this is in September last month. We didn't cut off aid then. Even though the concern that Biden expressed was that American offensive weaponry could be used in a ground attack at Rafah. And Israel went ahead and did it 3 months later. Nobody talked anything about withholding supplies. When Harris was asked about this very same time frame, we're support for Israel's unwavering. Okay. Got another Harris. Okay, so why now? You know, before I get to Crystal and Sagar, I got another Crystal clip here. Wanted to just, so I posted on Facebook. Let's see, do I have it? Okay, so this is what I posted on Facebook. I'll get to Crystal and Sagar. I think it's relevant. But I wanted to show this because one of the big, the talking points that's used against me and others who won't vote for, who won't endorse or won't say we'll vote for Harris, is that, you're helping Trump. You're making things worse. You're making things worse for yourself. You should just, bend the knee. And one response, which I certainly support, is that you have to demand something in return for your vote. Now, if you have a great candidate like a Bernie, or at least a very good candidate like a Bernie, you don't. You're already getting what you want for a lot from that candidate. But as I point out, and why I was critical of our revolution, because our revolution has been, PDA, by the way, Progressive Democrats of America, actually endorsed Harris. I was quite astonished to learn that. I learned that the other night. Our revolution did not. To our revolution's credit, I've been critical of our revolution. Our revolution, to its credit, my former group, has not formally endorsed Kamala. But they are making calls into the swing states for her. And as I understand it, they're not even asking you to vote for her. They're asking you to vote against Trump. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I understand they're not actually, the script isn't you have to vote for Harris. The script is you have to vote against Trump, which if that means you can vote for Jill Stein, I'm okay with that. That's fine. If your script is, hey, you can't vote for Trump, but you can vote for Stein, I'm good with that. So I don't quite know what their script is. But PDA has endorsed Harris. So here's what I wrote. Bernie, because Bernie endorsed Harris. AOC endorsed Harris. It looks like it really does pay to withhold your vote from dangerously flawed candidates unless they start making concessions and addressing your concerns in a serious manner. So this goes to, remember, and I have the quote, the headline from the AP, Harris announced a new plan to empower black men as she tries to energize them to vote for her. This is kind of funny because remember, Obama was bashing black men and saying that they're not feeling a woman for president, right? They don't feel it, that maybe they're sexist. And the response from Harris is not to chide them the way Obama did, but we'll give you something. Here, we're going to throw you a bone. We've got a new plan. Now, I know the plan's getting a lot of, mocked. I haven't seen it. I don't know. Apparently, there isn't much to it. I think there's part of it was to legalize marijuana and make sure that black men get, or blacks, African Americans get some piece of the industry, right? The pot legalization, once pot's legalized nationally. So, okay, that's probably good. I won't be too harsh on it. I don't think it's nearly enough, but okay, it's something. In any event, the point is that if a group is viewed as insufficiently supportive, they get something. They're saying, no, we're not feeling it, as Obama says. And guess what Harris says? Okay, maybe you'll feel this. We're going to give you some piece of the pot pie. So that's what I'm saying is, hey, we're not going to give Harris our vote unless we get serious, meaningful concessions in areas that are critically important. First and foremost, genocide. And that's what I see this announcement from Biden as being. It's a concession. We're not doing well. Arab Americans prefer Jill Stein. Some are saying they'll even vote for Trump. We got to give them something. So we're not really going to give them something. We'll say we're going to give them something. We'll give them a threat to Bibi that in 30 days after the election, so by then it doesn't even matter what we do. And hopefully we'll snow job a few people into believing that crap. So the response, I got this response, let me put this up here in full, which I thought was kind of interesting. And when I saw when I first saw this response, my thought was, oh, by the way, before I get it, don't forget, I talk about this quite a bit, but yeah, click subscribe. Come on, let's get those subscriptions up. And yeah, call if you're watching live. I noticed we had for me, a good number. We had 10 people who watched my video yesterday live, or at least were at various points on while it was live. So that was with Diane Perlman, the political psychologist. I meant to ask her what a political psychologist is. I never got a chance. I would have really liked to have gotten that information from her. What is a political psychologist? But if you're so basically, we have some people watching live, viewing live. Give me a call, 240-242-5646. I do this because I want to talk to you live. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you have to say, and I also want you to subscribe. I want you to subscribe. So this was the response. When I saw this response, I saw the first sentence. I saw it looks like it really does pay to withhold your vote from dangerously flawed candidates unless they start making concessions. So that's a quote of what I said. I before I read the second paragraph, I was certain there was going to be a discussion of how there's a concession. The concession being that in 30 days, the Harris-Biden administration is prepared to withhold arms to Israel. And I was going to say, but that's no concession at all. That's just following the law, and not even really following it. The law saying we can't supply arms to countries that prevent us from providing humanitarian aid. So it's not a concession at all. But that's not where this poster went. This poster went is, when do you plan to change your vote recommendation following the MAGA militants riots on December 11? Will you finally realize how badly you messed up after the election is thrown to the House, where in this case, each state has only one vote and Trump would surely be elected? So I view the prospect of a Trump second term as scary, very scary. But I also view the prospect of a Harris first term as scary. Is it as scary? Well, let me say this. I worry that Trump could usher, if Trump gets elected president, he would usher in, as president, fascism to the point where we don't have free elections going forward. Because our elections are pretty... Now, we don't have a lot of choice. We actually do. See, if you really want free elections, you got to vote for the best candidate. In this case, it's the only good candidate, Stein. I worry that Trump, if Trump takes office, that yes, there might not be a free election in 4 years. That would be, in any way really could be considered a true free election where we choose. I worry about that more. I don't think that if Harris were elected, we wouldn't have a free election in 4 years. I think we would. And that's really important. But I also worry that if Harris is elected and the genocide in Israel continues and the indifference to the plight of, poor, struggling, working class Americans by Democrats continues, and wealth and income inequality continues, and the climate holocaust gets worse, I also worry that the next Republican to run for president, because I assume at Trump's age it won't be he, might well be even worse, more frightening, more of a demagogue, would do even more horrible things than Trump. So I can't say with confidence that fascism is more likely in the long run if Trump becomes president next year versus if Harris does. I would say, yes, fascism, full-blown totalitarian or authoritarianism is more likely, much more likely if Trump is the next president. But in the long run, in 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, I don't know. I can't say that. Because Trump's triumphs are secondary to the betrayal of the American people by the Democratic Party. If that betrayal is going to continue, and I'm sure it will if Harris is elected, then we can only, based on history, fret, worry, believe that something worse could happen down the road. Whereas if Trump is elected, maybe there's a reaction from the American public against this kind of demagoguery and maybe there's a recognition by the I'm saying it can happen. It's not going to happen. Who am I fooling? Maybe there's no recognition by the Democratic Party. They need to go in a better direction. But maybe progressives will really start to take more seriously the idea of voting for an emerging party candidate and supporting an emerging party like the Green Party. And that could make a difference. All right, just in case you don't view Trump as the threat that I believe he really is, I've got a clip here of Trump because I don't pay as much attention, as much mind to Trump. I don't think my viewers are going to vote for Trump. I don't think I've never once said one should vote for Trump. I don't think, to me, Trump is not in any way even arguably or potentially an acceptable option. For some people he is. I get it. I hear you. And I've been clear on that. I think in some areas he's less awful than Harris. But the demagoguery, the fascism, the authoritarianism is terrifying. Here's Trump.
Listen to what he said.
We have the greatest military in the world, but you have to know how to use them. You have to know how to use them. But I protect you against outside enemies. But I always say we have the outside enemy, so you can say China, you can say Russia, you can say Kim Jong-un, you can say, but that's not, it's going to be fun. If you have a smart president, no problem. It's the enemy from within, all the scum that we have to deal with that hate our country. That's a bigger enemy than China and Russia.
All right, so it's very scary, that stuff, that language, and I could try to turn it around and I could say things like, well, I do believe we have an enemy within the billionaire class is contemptuous of democracy. The billionaire class, the American billionaire class, doesn't care about the American worker. They're, if anything, trying to eliminate the American worker. But that's not what Trump's talking about. Trump is demonizing immigrants. He's demonizing progressives. He's demonizing people who are saying, no, we can't support Israel. Using words like scum, enemy within, that's really is pure fascist language. And he is a very scary guy. And I sure as heck don't want to be president. But I don't fear him to the point where I will vote for a genocider. I will vote for somebody like Kamala Harris, who's so vapid, so empty. No, I can't do that either. So that leaves one choice. I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.